Wherever you are, whoever you're sitting with, whatever you're watching this on, welcome and thanks for tuning in with us. Thanks for keeping in touch with the Mayfair family. We love you all and we miss you all, and we are really excited for the day that we can do this again face to face in person. Last week I had one of those days. You know what I'm talking about? I had one of those days where I woke up full of such promise, and the more things I tried to do, the less I actually got done. The things I tried to do didn't work. None of my plans came to fruition. And as the day went on, I just got more and more frustrated. More frustrated, my attitude soured. And by the time I was ready to go home, I just had it. I was done. I'd had enough. I'd had enough of the situation. I had had enough of the day. I was just in a bad spot emotionally and physically. And so what do when I'm in those situations? I reach for the pick-me-ups, right? I get a real Dr. Pepper, not the diet stuff, the hard stuff. I get a real Dr. Pepper. I get in the truck. I turn on some of my favorite music. I get home. I sit on the floor with my daughter and my wife. I watch one of my favorite TV shows or one of my favorite movies. I turn to my favorite passages of Scripture. I turn to the things that pick me up. I go to the things that warm me up from the inside out. If you're anything like me, this situation, having these days, having those bad days, is happening to me a little bit more often during this whole quarantine scenario than maybe they did before. And so for the next few weeks, we're going to look at some of those verses and passages that we turn to. Some of the ones that comfort us, some of the ones that pick us up, some of the ones that help us when we're in those bad places, when we're having one of those days. We're going to call these elevator lessons, the passages that we turn to that pick us up off the floor. This week we're going to start with one of my all-time favorites, and one that feels especially relevant in this day and age, the feeding of the 5,000 in John chapter 6. There's a lot of tension in the air right now. It feels like as soon as we get one thing ironed out, another issue pops up. And this has been happening really for the last couple of months at this point. And much of the tension and struggle and anxiety centers around one word: enough. Think about the things we've read and heard over the last 8 weeks. We don't have enough hospital beds. We don't have enough ventilators. We don't have enough masks. We don't have enough hand sanitizer. We don't have enough toilet paper. We don't have enough groceries. We don't have enough meat. We don't have enough jobs. We don't have enough money in the economy. We don't have enough space to work from home. We don't have enough peace and quiet to work from home. We don't have enough patience to homeschool our kids. And don't misunderstand where I'm going here. These are legitimate concerns. These are real issues. And since they're legitimate and real, sometimes they weigh heavy on us. When I think about when I have one of those days, one of those bad days, I find the same word echoing through my brain about my situation: enough. I didn't get enough done today. I'm not doing enough. I'm not enough. Enough, enough, enough. John chapter 6, beginning in verse 1. Sometime after this, Jesus crossed to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee, that is, the Sea of Tiberias, and a great crowd of people followed him because they saw the signs he had performed by healing the sick. Then Jesus went up on a mountainside and sat down with his disciples. The Jewish Passover festival was near. When Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming toward him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" He asked this only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. Philip answered him, "It would take more than half a year's wages to buy enough bread for each one to have a bite." So here we have a problem. We have a big problem. We have a big crowd. We have a big hungry crowd, and we have no food. We have a big deficit. We have a massive need. And Philip, I love Philip in this moment. Philip is the realist of the group. Philip is how I think we would respond if Jesus asked us this question. Jesus looks among the huge crowd, and he looks at Philip almost with a smirk and says, "How are we going to feed all these people?" And Philip's response is, "Impossible. There are too many people. We don't have any food. We don't have any bread. We don't have any money. not even if we pooled all of our money, would we have enough money to buy this bread? We cannot feed everyone. This is an impossible situation. We don't have enough. Let's keep reading in verse 8. Another of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. Here is a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish, but how far will they go among so many? I love the imagery in this scene. You have Jesus turning to Philip and asking him the question, and Philip's response is, impossible, never going to happen. And we don't have any other insight into Andrew. You almost just picture him taking off. He just goes. He's plowing through the crowd. He's looking for any sign of hope. He's looking for a small piece of food, anything that can give him a leg up in this moment. He's pushing through the people. You can imagine this huge crowd, and he's yelling at the top of his lungs, does anybody have anything to eat? Does anybody have food? And there's a small boy who we can imagine just hears the call and looks down at his basket. He doesn't think about how much is in there. He doesn't think about how many people are around. He just hears the call for food and he says, I've got some. So naively, he stands up on his tippy toes and he stretches his hand up in the air to reach above the adults around him. And he says, I have some. I've got some food. Andrew rushes over and finds that the boy has 1 basket with some bread and a couple of fish. This is not unlike the scene where the parents might be sitting at the kitchen table. Money is tight. Things are stressful at the moment, and now the car has broken down. And so here are the parents having a heated discussion about how are we going to pay for the mortgage and how are we going to get the groceries and still pay to fix the car. The child in the next room is pretending to watch what's happening on television, but is really intently listening to the parents' hushed conversation. And all of a sudden, she has an idea. She rushes off into the bedroom and she grabs her piggy bank, the ones that she's been stuffing her dollars and quarters into, and she pulls it down off of the shelf and she brings it into the kitchen and she sets it on the table in front of the parents. And innocently and naively and as full of hope as she can be, she says, I can help. The amount is insignificant. The amount that's in her piggy bank wouldn't make a dent in the repair bills. It wouldn't offset any of the mortgage, and at best it would buy a couple of bags of chips at the grocery store. The amount is insignificant, but the gesture is priceless. Andrew grabs the boy and takes him forward almost as naively as the boy offers. Andrew rushes him to the front to see Jesus, and he shows Jesus the basket, and he says, this is what we've got. Let's keep reading now in verse 10. Jesus said, have the people sit down. There was plenty of grass in that place, and they sat down. About 5,000 men were there. Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted. And he did the same with the fish. When they had all had enough to eat, he said to one of his disciples, gather the pieces that are left over, and let nothing be wasted. And so they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. On those days, the days where I don't have it, the days where I'm just feeling beat down, this passage fills me with hope. I sat down and started writing out the ways that this passage inspires me this last week, and my list got pretty long, but no worries, I narrowed them down to 3. Here are 3 reasons why in our current situation, I find this story so comforting. Number 1, I can't, but Jesus can. The disciples didn't perform this miracle. The boy didn't multiply his food. The collective efforts of the crowd did not produce enough food for everyone to eat. Human ability and initiative failed in this moment. No one just worked harder to make this happen. Jesus made it happen. Jesus stepped into an impossible situation and performed a miracle. This is why Jesus asked the question that he already knows the answer to. This is why he looks at Philip, and as grinning as he is on the inside, he asks, where shall we buy the bread? They can't. There is no answer to this question. There are times when we feel like giving up, and we just need to buckle down and work harder. There are times when working harder and pushing through is the solution. Then there are times when we're just trying to control something that we can't control. And in a moment of frustration, we cry out, I can't do this. And to me, it's incredibly comforting to hear Jesus say, you're right. You cannot do this by yourself. Quit trying to control every aspect of your life and turn it over to me. You can't, but I can. Number 2, the amount is insignificant. In verse 9, Andrew walks up to Jesus and says, here are 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. Let's ask this question. If the boy only had 3 loaves and 1 fish, would that have kept Jesus from performing this miracle? What about 1 loaf and 1 fish? Or let's go the other way. We're talking roughly 10,000 to 15,000 people here. If the boy had the strength and a big enough basket to carry 300 loaves and 250 fish, would that have fed everyone? And the answer is still no. What matters is that he gave. What matters is that he took what he had and he turned it over to Jesus. On our bad days, we say things like, I don't have enough to give. I didn't feel like I had enough to give yesterday, and now today I have even less than I did. What difference does it make? Whatever I can do won't even make a dent. I only have 5 loaves and 2 fish. What will that do among so many? But what matters is that we take it and we give it to Jesus. What matters is that when every social clue surrounding us and the boy in that moment said, you're hungry too, keep it and have a snack, the boy gave anyway. The amount is insignificant, but the gesture is priceless. Which leads me to number 3. When we are willing to share, everyone eats. I've mentioned this in a couple of sermons already during this pandemic, and mostly I think it's because it surprised me. I didn't see it coming that fast. But the ugly side of us that races to the grocery store to hoard something that we're afraid we might run out of came out immediately in this situation. We had grocery store owners that went on television stations to plead with people to just buy what they would need on a regular basis. We still didn't listen, and stores had to put up limits on how many of certain things we could buy at a time. Gandhi famously once said, the world has enough for everyone's need, but not enough for everyone's greed. There is a possible scenario in this story in which the boy and his parents had a nice snack and let everyone else fend for themselves. Let there be no doubt that there was more food in the crowd that day than just 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. There was more food available, but nobody else offered. And the boy offered, and everybody ate. Jesus can take the smallest piece and make it enough for everyone and bless others with it. All we have to do is be willing to give it. This week, find hope and joy in this passage. Find hope and joy in Jesus. And no matter how insignificant you may feel or how little you got done, know that when you turn it over to Jesus, it is enough.